So hello and welcome to everyone on this last day of the intensive News and Map staff training. My name is Sarah Sue and I'm Head of Strings and Chamber Music at the Royal Irish Academy of Music. The RIAM will be hosting 3 60-minute training sessions today, focusing on how to build self-leadership and an entrepreneurial mindset. I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, flautist and performance psychologist, Vourneen Ryan, who will be leading the first training session today. Vourneen teaches flute and career strategy at the RIAM. She previously held the position of co-principal flute with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra in the UK, and she is director of performance coaching consultancy, the School of Performance. Towards the end of the session, there will be a breakout room discussion and a chance to ask questions. So rather than save up your questions until the end of the session, I'd really encourage you to write these in the chat at any point during Vourneen's presentation. When we enter the discussion portion at the end of the session, which will be about 35 minutes or so it will be fantastic if all participants could ensure that their cameras are on so that we can allow open discussion in the breakout rooms. So it's my pleasure now to pass over to Vourneen Ryan.
Hi, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to having an insightful, interesting discussion around what I'm going to present to you. So at any point, please do ask questions or in the chat box, and Sarah will be looking out for them and can moderate. So I would like this to be a friendly, open session. Please come in with ideas or questions at any point, okay? So this presentation, I'm going to start sharing the screen in a minute with my slides. It is very slide heavy, and the reason I've done this is that there's lots of information that I wanted to give to you. And rather than kind of reading it in a book afterwards, or you kind of going everywhere to look for it in different sources, I wanted you to have it all in the slides. So there's a lot of slides. I'm going to be reading a lot from the slides, but this is a training session. So I thought, let's put them all in the slides, and then you can take those slides away afterwards and use it in your own teaching practice, or use it in whichever way you would like in your institutions. So that's the reason it's quite slide heavy. Also, you'll be able to get these slides at the end of the session on the AAC website on the link to this event. Also, the slides, the information in the slides are all from a research perspective. So they're all evidence-based. It's not just Vourneen Ryan having these ideas and putting them in a slide. So at the end of the slides, there are references that you can look at and you can go to afterwards. So it's all evidence-based. A lot of it is from a psychological perspective, as I'm a psychologist. I'm a performance psychologist, but also performance and educational psychology. There's lots and lots of crossovers. So I'm drawing from each of those sources. So yes, so I'll start the slideshow. At any point, please come in questions, but I do want to say this is all evidence-based and it's from a sound research perspective. So I'm going to share my screen now. Here we go. And I'm going to start my slideshow beginning. Okay, so I'm just going to move this so I can see. Okay, so how can we promote a growth mindset within higher music institutions so that we can develop entrepreneurial and innovative thinking among students and staff? So that's the question, and that's what we're going to discuss today. So the discussion points, I'm going to firstly talk about entrepreneurial mindset and what that is. And I suppose innovative thinking within an entrepreneurial mindset, you are going to be thinking in an innovative way. And then I'm going to talk more about growth mindset, and then talking about how to incorporate growth mindset training in our teaching practice, and then going into age appropriate interventions. So talking about growth mindset and when is best to introduce certain areas of growth mindset training within a young musician's and an adult musician's life cycle. And then lastly, in the last part of the presentation today, we're going to talk about how do we incorporate this into our institutions. So what we're doing today is we're kind of starting on a micro level and we're finishing the whole discussion on the macro level. So looking at what we do as an institution on an institutional level to to include these interventions in our work. So people with an entrepreneurial mindset, they have passion. So passion being purpose, a sense of purpose and curiosity. They are usually positive people, or they have an element of positivity about them, and that brings with it productive ways of thinking in order to be positive. They're proactive, so they use great goal setting strategies, and perseverance is usually a quality we equate with having an entrepreneurial mindset. So good resilience, and included with that is a growth mindset. So this is what we want to include in our education of young musicians and of musicians in higher music education, all these qualities, if we can try to develop and encourage this within our institutions. So there are two great thinkers I'd like to talk about today. We're going to the first point about purpose and passion of having an entrepreneurial mindset. And the first great thinker is a man called Simon Sinek. So everyone probably has heard of him. He's done a very famous TED talk about the why, and he's written lots of books. One would be Start with Why. And he's got a great website, great trainings. I definitely recommend him if you're thinking about looking into purpose, and especially in relation to entrepreneurship. So he has this model called the golden circle, which I really like. It's the why, the how, and the what. So his belief is that if we start with the why, the how and the what will be communicated more effectively. So why is your purpose, cause, or belief? The how is your strengths, values, and guiding principles. And the what is your output as a musician. So I like this quote that he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So if I give an example of the how, what, and why, a nice example is that you have two musicians, let's call them two string quartets, and they're doing a concert. So one comes from the what perspective, and one comes from the why perspective. So the person with a what perspective, they play music, so they're going to play a concert. It's really great. How do they do it? They have strategies. They're going to have a website. They're going to market themselves. It's going to sound really good because they're all really good musicians. But what's the why? Because they want to do it, because they want to make money, because they want to play together. Now that's totally valid and that's great. But as an audience, if you're looking at it from an entrepreneurial mindset, are we going to engage with that? Why should we go to this concert as opposed to the other concert down the road? So if you're looking at another perspective, if we can get students to go from the why perspective, you have the same string quartet. They're very good, they play really well. So what they do is they're going to play a concert. How are they going to do it? They're going to market locally, they're going to do Facebook, they're going to do social media. But the why might be different in this case. So maybe why they're doing it is they're going to partner with a charity because they want to help people. So that's a nice why. And if I had a choice of a concert that's for charity, maybe, and because someone's really interested in or wants to help people, that might be a reason I go to something more than just because I'm going to a concert because people want to make music. Or else maybe the string quartet are going to partner with local food producers and they're going to set up a really nice community feeling. So that's another why. So people tend to buy into the why more. So when you're looking at mindset and entrepreneurial mindset, if we can develop in our students the why, it can be a really, really effective way of communicating what you have to offer as a musician. So communicate, so in context, let's go to the slide, entrepreneurship and mindset. So communicating, for our students to communicate their why and knowing their purpose, it helps you to reach an audience who are willing to consume what you offer. So Simon Sinek did a lovely example on his TED talk of Apple and Microsoft. So the reason people tend to go for Apple is because Apple sell the why, they sell the feeling, they sell the design, they sell the nice kind of fuzzy feelings you get when you buy an Apple iPhone, as opposed to maybe another computer device which might be just as good. So communicating your why for our students, having the why or the sense of purpose can help with motivation. So the why is encouraging intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation, we're focusing on outcome goals. So this can be a real demotivator. If a student has a really clear why, this can get them out of bed on a cold, dark morning. They want to go and do what they want to do because they have a sense of purpose and a sense of why. Encourage students to find their why through dialogue and collaborative learning. So we can use a nice dialogue in our teaching practice, collaborative learning, give students a sense of autonomy about what they're doing, get them closer to the why, coaching and self-awareness practices. Also, let's reassess their why regularly. What is their purpose as a musician? So the why must be flexible for a student's life cycle. So some student at first year is going to have a different why than a student in the third year. There are different needs, and their values and priorities are shifting all the time. And after they know their why, they can then progress to learning entrepreneurial skills so they can communicate the why with the outside world. So a lot of the times, I know as a career development teacher, I've gone to a group of students in the third year and I've said, okay, let's do a business plan, let's do a project. And I'm like, what do you want to do it on? And there's silence, because really, they've never thought about what they want to do. They don't have their why, they don't have their purpose. So what we'd like to do is to really start developing the sense of purpose amongst our students. Okay, so we're going to go on to how to incorporate the why. This presentation is about staff and students. So how to incorporate the why among staff and students. So among staff, performance management sessions to have that open dialogue, staff training opportunities. So for a student to have a why, staff must have a why as well. Most staff members in institutions are professional musicians themselves, and they're on their own journey as a musician. So they have to have that support from the institution as well. So performance management sessions are brilliant for this. Staff training opportunities, effective leadership, and an opportunity for staff members to have some coaching and mentoring if needed. For students, we can do effective goal setting. So that's looking at kind of process performance goals, regular check-ins on the why. So as part of, I know as a teacher myself, I regularly ask the student, no matter what age they are, why they're doing what they're doing. And this can be a really nice opener to a lesson or in the middle of the lesson, because sometimes they're rushing in, they just don't know why they're there sometimes, and sometimes I don't know why they're there. So it's good for us all to check in on our whys within a lesson context. And also exploring values and their alignment of these in relation to the student's musical output. So what are the values of the student? I mean, from a personal perspective, my values as a musician, I never really thought about them, and I never really thought about why. And I went through the very traditional, very kind of stressful, I suppose, and stringent flute performance training, got my orchestral job. And I was sitting on my chair, and 3 years later, I thought, why am I here? I've never thought about why I wanted to be a professional musician. I'm now sitting in this orchestra. What do I want to do with my life? So I think it's great if we just always kind of try to align the values of the person with the student. Okay, so we're going to go on to a more philosophical why. So we've talked about Simon Sinek, and now we're going to go to Joseph Campbell, who's a great philosopher and teacher, and he's written The Hero's Journey, which is used a lot in leadership work, talking of the hero's journey. And I just think there's some lovely quotes here that I'd like to share with you. And these are quotes that you can bring into your own teaching practice, into your own institutions. I have them, I'd love to have them up on the wall of every music lesson I'm teaching, because I think they're really inspiring and they're really beautiful when you think about what purpose is. So his first quote is, "Follow your bliss and the universe will open doors where there were only walls." So that's a really nice way to think of purpose, following your bliss. What is your bliss? He also said, if you follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while, waiting for you, and the life that you ought to be living is the one you are living. Wherever you are, if you are following your bliss, you are enjoying that refreshment, that life within you all the time. He talked about uncertainty. So entrepreneurs and an entrepreneurial mindset and way of living can have that element of uncertainty in it. But he said the most essential part of finding your bliss is the element of uncertainty. And he also refers to Rilke, who wrote that beautiful book, Letters to a Young Poet. I would recommend every single young music professional or student to read this book. Rilke says to live the questions rather than reaching for ready-made answers. And I think if we can have the mindset of living the questions, that in turn is embracing an entrepreneurial mindset. The adventure is its own reward, but it's necessarily dangerous, having both negative and positive possibilities, all of them beyond control. We are following our own way, not our daddy's or our mother's way. Life can dry up because you're not off on your own adventure. So he also talks about purpose and that sense of cause and belief as an adventure. Lastly, there's something inside you that knows when you're in the center, that knows when you're on the beam or off the beam. And if you get off the beam to earn money, you've lost your life. And if you stay in the center and don't get any money, you still have your bliss. So this is interesting, I think, because he's aligning, your work and your feeling of congruence and authenticity. Like, are you on the beam or are you off the beam? We all know that feeling when the work we're doing isn't really what we want to do or the purpose that we have, and it feels off beam. But he's saying that if you get off the beam to earn money, you've lost your life. So what he's doing is he's really encouraging entrepreneurship. But isn't it terrible? He says, if you don't get any money. So what we're going to try and do as institutions is let people find that purpose, but also give them the skills. So everything is based up with entrepreneurial skills. Find your bliss, but here are the skills to help you to get there. But first, find your bliss, find your why. Okay, so positivity. So this is another thing. Talking about productive ways of thinking can be helpful for a student to cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset. So focus on what they can control, their own effort, their attitude, and their response to situations. We must give our students strategies to deal with failure and stress in order to promote a productive way of thinking. So we can introduce journaling practices. So Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, talked about the morning pages, which are extremely effective. There's also something called the 5-minute journal, which is excellent and very short to introduce into students' own practice. Mindfulness practices. We all know elite athletes are using mindfulness in their practice all the time. It's very, very effective. Exercise, keeping the body fit, keeping the body well, nutrition, coaching and mentoring. Thought records can also be a nice thing to bring into the lesson scenario. So having your sheet of paper there, a student is playing, a student is performing, and they're recognizing what their own thoughts are. And then making friends with your inner critic. So to have an entrepreneurial mindset and to be an entrepreneur, there's going to be the gremlin on your shoulder, there's going to be the inner critic. So we can have strategies to recognize the inner critic's voice and how we respond to it productively. So that can be through cognitive reframing exercises. It'll be through lots of different ways we can do that. Park and replace techniques. There's lots of different things we can do to help our students in this regard. Goal setting. So we've got process goals, performance goals, and outcome goals. So to be an entrepreneur or to embrace the entrepreneurial mindset, we want to focus on process goals and performance goals. So process goals are looking at technique and strategy, and performance goals are looking at how we perform in a certain situation. Outcome goals are more, did you win or lose? Or, did you win the competition? Did you, did you do well in your exam? So that would be an outcome. So really we want to embrace an entrepreneurial mindset, we really want to be looking at the process, which is the step-by-step, daily, habitual routines to make someone strong as an entrepreneur, and also performance. So looking at how someone performs in a situation. And then lastly, before we go on to growth mindset, we've got resilience. So resilience is a really important part of embracing an entrepreneurial mindset. There are knockbacks a lot, and you have to have the ability to bounce back. So with that, as institutions, as teachers, we need to give coping strategies. So that can be positive outlook techniques, confidence techniques, what did you do well, constantly kind of having that dialogue with a student, mindfulness techniques, cognitive restructuring, like I spoke about before, coaching and mentoring. So that's kind of looking at entrepreneurial mindset and looking at how we embrace this within our institutions. And this is really talking about higher music education. So going into growth mindset training, we're talking more about, I suppose it is, of course it's in higher music education, but what's great about growth mindset training, we can start it extremely young. So that's what's really effective about it. So what is a growth mindset? People with a growth mindset believe talent and intelligence can be developed. People with a fixed mindset believe that talent and intelligence are fixed traits. So what kind of mindset do you have? So we've got a growth mindset here. You can probably learn what people might say. You've got a fixed mindset. So fixed mindset really believes my abilities determine everything. I'm either good at it or I'm not. I don't like to be challenged. Tell me I'm smart. A growth mindset is I can learn anything I want to. I want to challenge myself. When I fail, I learn. My attitude and effort determine everything. So it's more like a learner's mindset, the growth mindset. So the interesting thing when we look in a musical perspective of fixed mindset and growth mindset is that fixed mindset, traditional model of teaching, is coming from a fixed mindset perspective. So that's the kind of master apprentice style of teaching. Traditional teaching model, you're talented or you're not talented. You know, you're winning a competition or you're losing, you pass or fail. So there's that very black and white thinking within a fixed mindset. And what we have to challenge as educators is actually the industry still the industry still runs in that kind of from a fixed mindset perspective in some ways and in some countries. So you have the screened auditions for orchestral players, but you know, sometimes you get the job on the day. Luckily, some orchestras, a lot of orchestras now have got the trial process. So you kind of win an audition, but they might be 10 people might win and then 10 people might go on trial. But still our training and traditional model of teaching is from a fixed mindset perspective. So we're slowly going to the growth mindset, I think. Definitely as our institution, we're going in that way, and I think we're really embracing it. So that's more a collaborative learning, dialogue, giving students autonomy over their own progress. So we've introduced in the Academy a new practice journal, and with that, it's giving students autonomy over their own work. So they have to tick the box to say, yes, I agree with what you've said this week. I'm going to practice what you've told me to practice. And that very small tick box gives them a sense of who they are and their autonomy over their own work. And also we ask our students to reflect on what they've done in the week. So we're creating that conversation. So by giving them the diary and having those little goals within the diary and having the reflective area and having the tick box, and also what's nice about this diary, we don't have a parent's signature of doing the work. We don't have a teacher's signature. At the end of the week, they have their signature. It says student signature, and they have to write it. So it's giving them real autonomy over their own practice for the week and over their own work. So we're trialing it this year, but it's going to be interesting to see as an institution how this really changes our teaching methods and also the students thinking to be more in a learner's mindset. So the reason I talk about growth mindset in relation to entrepreneurship or an entrepreneurial mindset is that if you have a student who comes from a fixed mindset perspective, we're going to have a huge leap to get to an entrepreneurial mindset. So if from the age of 0 to 18, a student comes from a fixed mindset perspective, and then we bring them into higher music education, and in year 2 we say, okay, do you have any ideas? You're going to be an entrepreneur. Can you be an entrepreneur? We're going to put this in our curriculum. That's crazy. It's too big a leap. But if we come from a growth mindset perspective, we can start introducing these whys, these dialogues, these lovely conversations from a really young age. So when they come into 3rd level, it's a lovely natural progression for their growth mindset to turn into an entrepreneurial mindset. There's not a huge leap then. It's a very small transition. So I think what's in the past has been difficult to go from the fixed mindset. I know from my training was very fixed into suddenly an entrepreneurial mindset. And that can be a real struggle. So I think if we can really cultivate growth mindset within our institutions and in our teaching practice and within our staff, then we get closer to to harvesting an entrepreneurial mindset within our students, and then hopefully creating innovative thinking and new opportunities and job creation and a new life for classical music. So what's the connection between the two? I've just referred to it there. To have an entrepreneurial mindset, you must embrace a growth mindset to deal with setbacks and failures, to enter the learner's mindset, to be a lifelong learner. I've been a musician from the age of 6 and I am still learning, and I still see myself as a lifelong learner. Nothing is done yet. Confidence to fail. So we have confidence to fail and to dare greatly. Set process goals rather than outcome goals, and also to keep perspective. So does the student perceive situations as a challenge or threat? So our goal would be to try to encourage students to see situations more as a challenge rather than a threat, because we know if they go into threat mode, they kind of go slightly into the fight, flight or freeze. So even in their behaviors, so we're looking at embracing challenges and seeing them, reframing them as exciting challenges and opportunities rather than as a threat. So how can we harvest a growth mindset among our students and staff? So this is in the teaching room. I'll kind of list these as they're written. We can acknowledge and embrace imperfections in our students. We can view challenges as opportunities. We can try different learning tactics. So as students, as teachers, it's our responsibility to know whether our students are visual learners, are they auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. So it's important that we provide this training for our teachers and for our staff. So if we have a very visual student, we have the great thing called technology now, so we can introduce iPads into the lesson, or we can show pictures or show videos of someone performing as we'd like them to do, or embrace qualities that we'd like them to embrace. So there's lots of different ways, and also the language we use. So kinesthetic, how does that feel for you? Visual, how do you see that? So using that different types of language in their teaching. We can follow the research on brain plasticity, extremely interesting. There's a lot of new information. We as educators must keep on board with this and know what's happening. Replace the word failing with the word learning, which I hope we all do anyway in our own teaching practice. Encourage our students to stop seeking approval. Value the process over the end result. So what is a process? Keep focusing on process goals, performance goals. Like we talked about before, we need to cultivate a sense of purpose. So always introducing the why into the lesson. No lesson should start and finish without a why being part of it. Otherwise, why are we there? Celebrate growth with others. So this is why I love the class or the peer review, and I know we do this at the RIM now, so where students get to review each other, and there's a nice friendly feeling of celebrating each other's growth. Emphasize growth over speed. Why do we need to do an exam in 6 months? Can we do it next year? Why do we have to do things so fast? There's no need for it. Reward actions, not traits. Redefine genius. In our industry, we have this kind of genius myth, like you're born with this amazing talent, and like if you're not born like that, if your family aren't musical, then you're kind of on a back foot. So we need to redefine what we see as genius. I mean, there have been geniuses, obviously, but let's redefine that, and let's say, you can start being a genius at the age of 20. Why not? Portray criticism as positive. Dissociate improvement from failure. Provide regular opportunities for reflection. So that's really important through journaling, and also through our new practice diaries that we use at RIM. Reflect, weekly reflection. So there's always going back to the dialogue, always going back to the collaborative learning space. Place effort before talent. Highlight the relationship between learning and brain training. So this is my area of interest as a performance psychologist. Mental skills training, introducing that into the teaching room at every opportunity. Cultivate grit, and use the word yet. You can't do it yet, but you might be able to do it. So using yet. So the use of the word yet at the end of a sentence can be profoundly powerful. So I can't do that, you can't do it yet. So again, getting them into that learner's mindset. Learn from other people's mistakes, make a new goal for every goal accomplished, take risks in the company of others. I like this, and I think this is why the class system in institutions is quite nice. So, you know, they use it a lot, I know, in different countries, but it's nice to have a class. So you have like your individual lesson, but then a class gets to play in front of each other. This is your chance to take risks. And I think it's a lovely, it can be a lovely thing to do, because then taking risks in the outside world can be less scary. Think realistically about time and effort. So setting SMART goals, time measured goals, and taking ownership over your attitude. So again, that's why in our practice diaries, we're letting a student have a sense of autonomy and ownership over their own work. So a few examples: student challenge 1, frustration due to slow progress. These are the types of things we can say. I'm not going to, you'll get all these slides afterwards, so I'm not going to go through each one. It's normal to make mistakes as part of learning. It's not that you can't do it, you just can't do it yet. I admire your persistence. Student challenge 2, struggling to understand a lesson. These are the types of things you can say. I'm here to help. What questions do you have? So it's opening a dialogue. This is difficult. Let's take this one step at a time. Let's set a small goal and work on that first. So these are the nice types of things you can bring into your lessons. Student challenge 3, not putting effort into set technical and performance practice. How can we make this more interesting to you? So again, it's opening the conversation, collaborative learning. Here are some suggestions on how you can take this further. How can I challenge you further? So it's also saying, how can I help? There's 2 of us in this. You're not on your own. There's 2 of us. This is collaborative learning. How can I help you? Not this is how you do it. You know, this is good, this is bad. So it's opening that lovely dialogue. Again, embracing, cultivating the growth mindset. Piece is too difficult. Describe your strategy. Where are you running into problems? So this is also at a very young age bringing in the idea of strategy and the idea that there's not one way to do everything. There's lots of different strategies in order to meet your goals or to achieve something. Again, feeding into the entrepreneurial mindset in the future, that there's not one way to do everything. Let's work on this together, find out what's happening. So this is also a nice way of a problem solving. So actually within the lesson, you're bringing in all these different skills that they can use in life and in business and in their own work. Let's work on this together, find out what is happening. Let's break this down, chunking it down into smaller steps. So I'm going to finish this slide part of the show with age-appropriate interventions. So I'm talking about growth mindset training. What's so lovely about it is that we can start it at age 0, which is great. So this is looking at really the student's life cycle. This comes from elite athlete development. So we know sports organizations and institutions have been, I suppose, really ahead of us with regards dealing with elite and dealing with talent, elite athletes, and how to introduce mindset training at a very young age. And how in turn, if you introduce that really at a young age, you're kind of a developing athlete, or in this case, we're going to talk about musicians, can adopt this very productive mindset, and in turn, hopefully for us, can naturally develop into an entrepreneurial mindset. So from the age of 0, as teachers, we can make a personal connection with each child and stay focused on giving them a positive experience. So finding little successes in everything they do, bring everything back to fun, avoid reference to talent or outcome. 6 to 9 years, we can create an environment in which children want to participate, can show their desire for musical activity, and can play with friends. So this is the real important thing. Like let's start group work at this. Let's start mini ensembles, orchestra, modify music and ensemble orchestral rules to maximize action for everyone, and reinforce effort, progress, and learning. So let's not have an orchestral situation where we have a junior orchestra with a conductor telling everyone what to do. Let's embrace the growth mindset and have it more like a collaborative process. Learn to practice 9 to 12 years. So encourage holistic music development, integration of mental fitness activities. So this is my area. So allow time and opportunity to do this, emphasize effort, responsibility. This is what we're doing with our practice diaries. They're responsible for their own work, they're signing it, They're ticking that they agree with what they have to practice, teamwork and respect for others. So let's have some type, we're introducing a code of conduct as well within our musical community of how we work as a team cohesion and respect for others. Practice to practice, 12 to 16 years. We're starting to incorporating mental training into the training plan. So mental fitness. So then we're looking here at developing resilience, you know, growth mindset, positive, productive thinking, all the things that feed into having an entrepreneurial mindset. Help facilitate access to performance psychology resources. 16 to 23 years. So now we're going into the transition between junior music education into higher music education. So teachers, we're going to focus on the positives and reinforce musicians' readiness for competition. We're going to help musicians focus on process goals and critically debrief performance execution. So within the room, me as a performance psychologist, I have an evaluation sheet, and I do believe in evaluation. So what I do is I always get a student to evaluate their own work, and then we talk about that. So always to have that element of evaluation. And also if a student can evaluate after a performance or a competition or an audition, this will help them not evaluate during, because as musicians, we have a real problem with evaluating ourselves during performance. And that can, again, ignite the inner critic, the inner voice, the demons in our head. If you have a place to have evaluation always within your own performance practice, that can really just, that has its own place within the performing life. So be strategic in helping musicians choose competitions and performances that will maximize development, avoiding mental or emotional burnout, extremely important, from participating in too many competitions and performances. So this is the last one, continue to focus on the positive. So it's 18 plus years. So practice to flourish. I just love the word flourish. It's exactly how we want to see our young musicians develop to flourish. Continue to focus on the positives and reinforce musicians' readiness for performance. So again, looking into process goals, and make sure musicians avoid mental and emotional burnout. That's very important, monitoring their mental, emotional and physical states. We have a huge problem with mental health with young people at the moment, due to many issues, due to social media, due to the stresses of today's world, but also to do with COVID. So we need to look at their performing life in a holistic way. We can't really, like Joseph Campbell said earlier, you can't really separate your life from your work, or your performing life from your life. So let's look after students, let's monitor their mental, emotional and physical states by keeping that dialogue going. Ask them for feedback often and continue to educate them on the purpose behind the practice plan. So continue to talk about the purpose again. This enhances their trust, sense of autonomy and self-determined motivation. So we talked earlier about motivation and how important it was to have self-determined motivation, intrinsic rather than extrinsic. So now I would like us to get into groups, and this is the question. So I've talked about staff, I've talked about students. So I'd like us to talk about how can we adopt a growth mindset at an institutional level? What would that look like? So we've done it in our own teaching rooms. We've tried as staff to keep on board with growth mindset training. But as an institution, so really, again, going to the macro, so we've done micro, but as a macro, how as an institution do we embrace a growth mindset? So I'd like us to discuss this question. You can all take it down if you want on a piece of paper. So I'd like you to look at curriculum design. So what can we do within the curriculum to adopt a growth mindset? Do we need to redefine success? So what are we championing? So are we saying, oh, this person got a job in an orchestra, great, let's put them on the front of our website, or let's all our alumni that are listed that are great, they're all the ones that are winning stuff and that are, you know, getting jobs in orchestras? Or are we actually promoting the people that are starting their own projects, being entrepreneurial? Are we really giving them the space as well with our marketing, with our outward looking view and from our institutions? And also let's look at teacher training initiatives that we could introduce, and also the mission statement. So maybe within our institution, should our mission statement it may do in some of your institutions, but can we include the idea of a growth mindset there? So I'm going to stop share the slides now, and Sarah, do you have any questions from so far?
We do have quite a lot of questions, but I don't know, Vourneen, if you'd like to do the breakout rooms first and then move to the questions.
Yeah, okay, we'll do the breakout rooms first, and then we will go into the questions. And I'm delighted that there's a good few. Thank you for that. So if we want to go into the breakout rooms now, we'll all have a discussion on this, and we can feedback. We'll have a moderator in each room, and we'll feedback that back to the group.
So thank you. So I think we're all back now. So Vourneen, I don't know if you want to bring us all together with sharing our breakout room discussions.
Yeah, so from our breakout room, I'm actually going to invite Paul, if that's okay. Paul led our discussion because I felt that maybe everyone has heard enough of me for the last 40 minutes. Paul, do you want to communicate what we talked about in our session just there? Oh, you're on mute, Paul, sorry.
Just one of our last speakers spoke about the importance of teacher training as being the way to go. And interestingly enough, the whole idea of training, I think itself is quite a challenging concept. And if I'm right in saying, I'm trying to find the person's name, Paolo mentioned about this idea of training as well. And we're being trained in our society to some extent to be operate in a kind of a business-like way of doing things. So we as artists, as creative artists, it's really about pushing back and encouraging this kind of growth mindset approach rather than receiving from outside. This is the way we should be behaving. Do you want to just chip in on that, Paolo? Because you had quite a bit to say there. If you'd like to just unmute a little bit about what you were saying in our session.
I was just saying that education, and I'm not talking just about music, I'm talking about education as a whole, has made it so that universities are cogs in a huge economic system, and they are trade schools rather than the centers of learning. If you have a center of learning, you can come out and not necessarily fulfill what the economic system wants you to do. But it's a huge problem. Learning a trade and getting a piece of paper and being able to go on with that trade in the economic system stifles a lot of the learning. And abilities for people to learn are much bigger than that. Yeah.
So the environment in which we work matters hugely. But I suppose if we continue to remember, we are creating the environment every single day ourselves, in every encounter that we have. And I suppose just being mindful of, there are so many challenges, but we can start with ourselves and how we show up. Sandra, do you mind if I just bring you in there? Because I know you were cut off at the very end there. The 8 minutes just didn't seem to be enough. So do you want to you were going to speak a little bit there, if you wouldn't mind. You have your mute on.
Okay. No, my idea is that is really inspiring this presentation. I think you have taken into account, for instance, the environment in which the learning occurs. For instance, in conservatoire is mainly based on comparison between performance, and there is an expectation about what is the better performance. So this leads to a competition environment, and it's difficult to consider the self-esteem of the students, to grow the also the confidence on their possibilities. So I think this is one aspect that we have to take into account, and maybe we can modify in our teaching.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Sandra.
I think maybe I'm going to ask from our breakout room, Trygve, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name not very correctly, to talk about he raised a really interesting solution almost, or approach that they're taking to teaching in the vocal department with team teaching. So I wonder if you could speak about that.
Yes, hello. I mentioned that we had this unique opportunity because we had a new professor. Our vocal professor was new, and that now we have no private teachers. They work as a team of 4 teachers, and yes, well, every student gets a private lesson with every teacher, but they work a lot in class settings and with the 4 teachers. And the thing is that this encourages and empowers the students to find out themselves what is good for me, and they have to do this reviews and diaries, and this is actually very it has done a very good thing, and the vocal department is now becoming one of our biggest departments, and so this works and has a positive
Thank you very much. And I think one really interesting thing that you said was this idea that no student belongs to a single teacher, and this is a big change in mindset, and I think something that can have a lot of power institutionally to promote change. So maybe we can move now to the last breakout room. If there were 3, is that correct, David, maybe?
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to try and be very brief because I see we're short on time, and there was so much to talk about, but just a couple of things that came up in ours. There was, Lindsay had mentioned the idea of passion, positivity, proactivity and perseverance, that, you know, in terms of curriculum design and also mission statement, if these are the kind of words we're using in a teaching room, is there any way to embed them more clearly into the kind of age-old institutional you know, goals that are already there for sometimes hundreds of years in institutions. We'd input also that the idea that perhaps if we look after the inner 2, the redefinition of success and teacher training, that possibly the 2 outer goals will realign, you know, by themselves. And really interesting, I don't know, Simona, if you want to briefly, I thought it was really interesting about visiting Finland, and the idea that sometimes students having an input, like a verbal input into other students, it could be a percussionist with a guitar exam, and that also feeds back into the teacher training, the fact that we have somebody from Italy going to Finland, looking at international best practice, and then taking back the best elements to their home institution. So Simona, if you wanted to just briefly, I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah, well, I went to Finland to the Novia University and for an STT, and it was very interesting to see that sometimes they do the same things but in a different way. So it was not. Sometimes it's not a matter of changing their curriculum, but doing, for example, an exam. In this case, that's what I've seen. So it was a pop music exam. So there was a group. There was a guitarist. There was a percussionist, the singer, but the student that was examined was just the guitarist. So the other students at the end of the exam, they had a say on how the exam went. So the singer could say, oh, you were very good at this, but I think these things didn't go very well. And everyone had a say. And at the end, it was very impressive because we are not used to that. Students have just to shut up. They can't say anything, not just the student that has been examined, but also the others. So if you do a chamber music exam, for example, and only one is examined, the other one can't say anything. So it was very interesting to see that it was just an exam as we have everywhere, but it was dealt in a completely different way, with much more open. And of course, I don't know, as I was saying, the technicalities of the thing, so how much their judgment could influence the teachers, but there was interaction, and it seemed some teachers really changed a bit their mind, listening to the other students. So I thought it was amazing.
Thank you so much for that, Simona. I'd like to just go on a little, that will run about 5 or 6 minutes over, just to address, because we had 4 really fantastic questions, which I think are really valuable to address. So maybe we can start. Can I ask Anna Maria Borden to ask her question, if she's here, if you can unmute?
you very much. I was wondering what is doubts for you, and you are talking about positivity and dreams and a lot of very important things for young people and for the entrepreneurial mindset. But the biggest enemy of the entrepreneurial mindset is something that we are all experiencing every day, and it is doubts. So I am very curious about your feeling, your thinking. Thank you very much for your very inspiring presentation. It's very important for us to have this opportunity. And I'm very curious about your thinking about doubts.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Yes, we all have doubts, and I certainly personally have many doubts. So I suppose to frame it, I see doubts as another way to express fear. You know, it's fear, isn't it? So having doubts is really being afraid. So fear is a huge area, and I think as humans we try to suppress it a lot and push it down. But I would encourage I've got some lovely mindfulness practices actually, and I would love to share it with everyone afterwards. I've got links, but there's some really nice imagery work you can do, visualization work you can do, but making friends with fear basically. And I think what's nice about talking about brain plasticity and about brain training, and I've done a lot of research now into the brain, it's been quite inspiring, and it's quite nice to know that having that fear is just part of being human, and it's part of being, all of us have that fear. And it's really nice when you look at the brain training research to see what parts of the brain, you know, the amygdala at the back of the head of the brain, that's where the fear comes from, and that fires off when we feel that fear. So to going into, I think, for understanding, and I work with resilience with young people a lot, and once they start to understand that this is normal, that it's human, and they just need to make friends with it because it's always going to be there. It's kind of that acceptance, it's acceptance theory really, and to accept your own fear is the first step. And you find when students accept they have fear, make friends with it, but also give them the strategies to deal with it. It can be, but we have a dialogue with fear through our whole lives and through about doubt. There's of course that happens, but it's just a way of kind of making friends. And I think by showing that it's normal, it's part of the human brain, it's the amygdala, it's the lizard brain, as a lot of people call it, it's always going to be there. So we have to just try to make friends with it and embrace it, because in a way fear has always kept us safe, hasn't it? Doubt, when we were cavemen, that doubt and that fear kept us safe. So we should actually thank that fear, because it has positive repercussions, but it has negative, but it can also have positive, because in the past it's kept us safe, and in a way it still keeps us safe. It's our intuition as well, isn't it? So thanks, Anna Maria. I hope that makes some sense.
Thank you very much to you. Thank you very much. It's a very good start point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vourneen. Maybe we can just move on to Imelda Drums, which was quite similar, I think, related to this topic. Imelda, if you want to read out your question. I'm just going to read Imelda's out because I don't think she has sound. So it's that students in conservatoire training constantly compare themselves to others. How do we get them to focus on their own journey?
Well, Imelda, thank you for your question. That's really important, and I've myself personally struggled with that. So focusing on your own journey, I often, with clients and with students, I'd work on a lovely exercise called the circle of influence, circle of concern. So what we're trying to do is, if we think of our students, being as proactive as they can. So you have, it's from the Stephen Covey's book, Habits of Highly Effective People. And if we fill that inner circle with strategies, with coaching, with nice dialogue, with coping strategies really, and with you know, education about brain plasticity, all those things, if we fill that inner circle, we're kind of pushing away the feeling, the lack of control feeling. So the inner circle can start like this size, but it can come out, so the outer things won't, like what other people think of you, what you can't control, your comparison to others. You're pushing your journey out into that circle. So the ones at the edge, really, they're going to be there, of course, but you cannot control other people's attitudes towards you, their behaviors towards you, or their response towards you. So it's about bringing that into the lesson as well. And I've some lovely worksheets on what you can control and what you can't control. And I think about bringing that into the lesson, it's quite important. But that the model of the circle of influence model is a really nice exercise to do with a student. I can share that also after this session.
And I think we have, if Lindsay Callahan could ask her question, we have just time for the last two.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for today. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the academic staff members, so those not teaching one-on-one instruments or anything like that. So this week we did a weekly check-in, like a mid-term check-in in my music history class to see how we're getting on in terms of the learning outcomes. But I'm just wondering, is there something I can do on a more regular basis so that the students feel engaged? That's similar to your practice, the reflective journal, which I think is just fantastic.
Yeah, Lindsay, I would thank you for your question. I would definitely you could have a modified journal, so you could have your own kind of questions that are, you know, relate to your work, and we can look as an institution of absolutely including that for you and more. And actually it'd be nice to have a dialogue with the academic staff, so the performance staff with the academic staff, because actually this is another problem. We're all in our own little department and we need to speak to each other more. So looking at collaboration, let's collaborate with the academic staff and find a way of using these tools in your realm as well. So I think we can do that. So I hope that helps, Lindsay.
Nice, Ben.
Thank you, Vourneen. And the very last question, I think, is quite a big one. So I thought we'd save this until last. And David, David Collins, can I ask you to unmute and ask your questions?
Sorry, Vourneen, a big question that isn't answerable in 60 seconds. But as educators, how do we move away from pigeonholing students based on their level at entrance to music conservatoire?
Ooh.
Sorry.
That's a really tricky one. And I know I talked about talent and all these things. I don't know. I mean, we've all got stories of the underdog kind of, you know, the people that are in first year that are the stars and the others catch up. I suppose, David, if we all as staff members particularly embrace this growth mindset, and if we're aware that there's people can enter at different levels, but you know, people can pass each other out, maybe have more kind of foundation year programs like we have at the academy, like the diploma programs, so that people can take time to develop. I don't know, it's a big question. I think you might be better at answering this, but there's a lot of, it's pigeonholing, because sometimes, you know, in our profession you can do it or you can't, you know, so the technical expertise and all these things are extremely important as well. Yeah. So so it's important that someone's at a really good level, you know, to get into conservatoire. But I think the pigeonholing thing, in my experience and from the research, it's done by members of staff, you know. So if we can really keep our staff, and again that lovely model of team learning, so that there's a lot of different staff members involved in that person's life cycle throughout the conservatoire, then that's where we're kind of heading, hopefully, with that issue.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. And also, just lastly, as an institution, if we embrace different things, so if we're inclusive and we're into diversity, then the person who maybe not necessarily be the most incredible technician, they have something else to offer. So it's up to us as educators to find, everyone's got so much things to offer. There's not just one size fits all. So it's up to institution to offer really nice modules, different things. And in turn, that's going to change the industry, because we're going to have different innovative thinkers coming out there doing some good stuff for our industry. So
Thanks so much.
So Vourneen, a huge thank you. I think you've got a huge number of thank yous in the chat as well. Just your presentation was really extraordinarily clear and inspiring, and has had so many practical tips to help us as teachers and educators, and in a bigger sense our own institutions as well, to really develop these growth and entrepreneurial mindsets. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being so open and engaging. I really, really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. The slides will all be online, but if you have any personal questions, you can go through the AAC and I'll answer them, no problem.